Let's bring Bob Wankel from Crossing Broad in and get his take on what this bullpen roles might start to look like. Bob, should we start to look at the Phillies bullpen and feel better about it now?
Well, I guess you could feel better about it. You can't feel much worse about it than you probably did the first 4 weeks of the season. So, yes, I think that the trade that they made with the Red Sox will help stabilize this thing a little bit. And some of the moves that they've made and some of the shuffling that they've done, I think, will make this a bullpen that's at least not historically bad or perhaps the worst in the history of the game. How about that?
I was going to say, before it was like it was a bad AAA bullpen. Now you've at least got an average an okay Major League Baseball bullpen, right?
Yeah, I think that, Heath Hembree's done a decent job, and Workman has been walking the tightrope here in his first few appearances, but I think he's actually a little bit better and will be a little bit more reliable than he's been. So I do think that things will stabilize a little bit. Like, listen, I don't believe that this is a top 10 bullpen as it's currently constructed, and even the law of averages, I don't think is going to bring this thing back down to a middle-of-the-road bullpen, but I also don't believe it'll be pitching to an 8 ERA for the rest of the season. So, I mean, I think that that's the optimistic outlook for this group. And it's interesting. I mean, we'll see what happens over the next few days. This is a weird trade market. There's a lot of teams that are still involved, even teams that you thought might win 20 games this season, like the Giants and the Marlins. They're hanging around and they're in this thing. And so some teams that you thought might be sellers might be a little bit more reluctant to do that. But I still think the Phillies are going to add. Some of the things that I've heard, they could add in a variety of different ways. The bullpen is obviously the most, pressing need, but I do think that they'll keep an eye out for an additional starting pitcher in the back end of the rotation. And, there have been some whispers about adding position players too. So I do believe that they're going to do something else between now and the trade deadline.
Is it weird that we haven't seen Hale yet, or do you think what he's going to be utilized with just didn't happen yet?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I got a pretty bad storm rolling through here right now.
Is it weird that Hale, we haven't seen him out on the field yet?
You don't have a hailstorm coming, do you?
No pun intended.
You see what I did there?
Yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah, I apologize. You guys are going out on me. All I heard was hell.
David, the pitcher, Hale. Is it weird that we haven't seen him yet?
Yeah, no, it is a little bit strange. I mean, they acquired him from the Yankees last week, and I guess the expectation is that you'll see him as more of like a fifth, sixth inning guy. The way that their games have sort of played out over the past week, I guess there's certainly, I don't know. I guess there hasn't been an obvious need for him. I think that he is a guy that is really, to be perfectly honest with you, just almost interchangeable with Garrett. It's like if we need a guy that's out of the bullpen in a blowout, like that's who we'll see. But I don't expect him to be a high leverage guy or taking down important innings for this team.
Yeah, Bob, another thing is, all right, so Workman, it looks like, is closing. What do you see Neris's role kind of being moving forward here? Is he a guy, I mean, he was the best guy you had, and now all of a sudden, I don't want to say he seems like a guy without a role, but where do you see Neris fitting in this bullpen?
I think that Joe Girardi will still try to play matchups and just try to assume and evaluate where, based on where a lineup is, who the better matchup is between Workman and Neris. I think that Neris is running out of opportunities, but I still believe that Girardi will probably go back to him in a ninth inning save situation again at some point here in the near future. Hector Neris is a really streaky pitcher, and if you go back to June of 2018, he was designated for assignment twice, sent down, and it was just a mess. And he stuck around. He came back up. And he figured things out, and he put together a nice run at the end of 2018 and pitched pretty well last year, but he's been very streaky. I think he's a guy right now that just kind of lacks confidence. I don't think that he's, I don't think he's had a great feel for his pitches, particularly the splitter. It's been non-competitive a lot of times. He's not getting a lot of guys to go down and chase that pitch, but he is a guy that has shown a history of getting really hot and going through cold spells. And I think that right now the Phillies have to hang in there. He has enough talent, especially relative to the rest of the bullpen options. And I think it would be, kind of silly to dismiss him at this point. So I think that Girardi's going to try to go back to him one or two more times and see. But obviously, again, you have a very short season. You only have so many opportunities to take advantage of potential wins, and you can't play around that much. So it's a situation with Hector Neris that's certainly worth evaluating. I don't think he's completely out of the closer role yet, but I do think more times than not, Girardi's going to lean with Workman right now, despite the fact that he has not been overly impressive.
What are your thoughts on Tommy Hunter's comments, his velocity, and his performance since those comments?
It's kind of weird, right? Like, we want athletes to, be candid and say how they feel and not just give these, prepackaged answers. And so Tommy Hunter comes out the other night and he says, like, hey, yes, it does piss me off that we've been criticized the way that we have been. And, we are working hard. We are trying. And, like, you do understand that. These guys are human beings, that they want to perform. It's not like they're going out there trying to pitch so poorly. But while I understand him defending and I think kind of taking a protective role with some of his teammates, you can't pitch like that and be so bad for such an extended period of time and also not expect that type of criticism. So I guess what I would have liked to have heard Tommy Hunter say is, yes, it does upset me, and yes, it does anger me, but also we totally understand it. And the fact that he didn't really kind of give the other side of it, or at least concede that the criticism was warranted, I thought was, I don't want to say it was weak, but I think there needs to be an admission on his part that, yes, this has not been close to being good enough. That being said, the way that he's gone out and thrown the ball the last few times, pretty good. I mean, if you're going to talk the talk, you've got to back it up. And since he's said that, and since he made his comments, he seems to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and it does seem to have a little bit of a motivating factor for him. So if that's what it takes, then okay.
Yeah, and, look, you mentioned Workman. Neris, we'll see what ends up happening. They've got Tommy Hunter pitching well right now. Morgan, if they could get Rangers Suarez and Alvarez back, all of a sudden, I mean, it's they've got some interesting options. Again, it's not a great bullpen, but it gives them some interesting options. And then all of a sudden, it completes the team a little bit more. Having a just good bullpen, not a great bullpen, it certainly changes my perception of them moving forward. So I guess the question is, does Matt Klentak look to add another arm to that bullpen by Monday, or does he think now that maybe I don't have the clear-cut closer, I don't have that great guy, but I got 6 or 7 good guys?
I think if everything was progressing well on the injury front, they may not be as inclined to do it. But we found out today that David Robertson, and we didn't really get a whole lot of detail on this, but he had a setback, and Joe Girardi said basically it'll be difficult for him to come back and pitch this season. So that's a big blow. Not that the Phillies, I think, were hitching all of their hopes to Robertson at this point, but there was some hope that he would come back. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. And Jose Alvarez, I mean, he's a guy that, I mean, you saw the injury that he sustained, and he may not pitch, for another 10 days before he starts throwing, and it might take him a week or two to ramp back up. So best case scenario, you probably see him the second week of September, and there's just not a lot of time. So there should be a little bit of urgency to add to the bullpen. But, it's going to just come down to price and what the Phillies are willing to part with and how creative they want to get with the financial packages. Because in any other year, if they had a lot of money to play with and the luxury tax was not a consideration, I would say that they would absolutely be adding somebody. But it's going to take some creativity if they want to continue to add, yet stay under the luxury tax threshold, which they've said and they've gone on record that if it's worth it, they'll go over. But I don't see a middle reliever or a 7th, 8th inning guy being the player that they go over the luxury tax for. I just don't. So it's going to, I think, take some creativity on the part of Matt Klentak to add to the bullpen at this point.
We rip Matt Klentak apart all the time for what he came into the season with. But when you look at this lineup, does he deserve some credit? I mean, Alec Bohm is hitting over 300. He's your 8th hitter tonight. And you just look at what he built from a lineup standpoint for this season, although you can argue the JT thing is definitely wonky. And when you look at the bench, there's actually people to bring off the bench. Last year, Andrew Knapp, who's having a hell of a season, by the way, was your guy coming off the bench last season, and he could barely do anything. Now you got Gosselin, Jay Bruce, who's been a spark. I don't know. I rip him all the time, but you look at this lineup and what it can be, it definitely is very solid.
Yeah, I think that there are mistakes that he has made, and some of those mistakes are very difficult to overcome. Handing Jake Arrieta $75 million over 3 years, and obviously they ignored the back end of the starting rotation last season. It killed them. They ignored the bullpen this year, but there are some things that he has done that have been good adds. And, you mentioned Phil Gosselin. That's a big part of it. I mean, he's been outstanding, whether he's been in the starting lineup against lefties or he's coming off the bench. Jay Bruce they got for essentially nothing. He's been a big contributor to this offense when he's been in the lineup and he hasn't been hurt. So you do have to give him a little bit of credit for that. It's a deeper bench. You could even argue that the obvious thing would have been to part ways with Andrew Knapp. That like, how could you possibly bring this guy back after the 2019 season that he had? And he's come back this year and he's played really well and he's a great fit in the clubhouse. And that wasn't an obvious move to make, even if it was an easy one. So, I do think that you have to kind of credit him for some things, but the issue I keep kind of coming back to is that we feel better about this right now because they're riding a nice little 3-game winning streak, but if you go back to last Saturday night, they're 9-14. They have the second worst record in the National League, and it just looks like a total disaster. And I think that that's the funny thing about baseball, how quickly things can turn. But I'm not ready to congratulate Matt Klentak on this team that he's built. I still think that he deserves a ton of criticism for the way that this team has performed, in 2018, 19, and into this season. But yes, there are some positives, and you do have to at least kind of tip the cap a little bit about the offense that has been assembled here.
No doubt. And obviously I'm not claiming that he's some phenomenal GM by any means, but if the bullpen was fixed, then you can argue that this team, could probably do something fun, if you will. I don't know what that really means in terms of a championship, but I'm not claiming that he's great by any means, but I look at the lineup and I think, okay, Didi Gregorius, great ad, the 1-year deal. Do you sense that it's possible he returns?
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible. He's had a great season, a great guy, fits well in the clubhouse. By all accounts, everything's going well that way. So, when you step back and look at it, there's probably more of a need for Didi Gregorius now because you don't know what the long-term future for Gene Segura is. I don't expect him to be a guy that's in Philadelphia for 4 or 5 years. And certainly because of what Scott Kingery has given you or hasn't given you this year, if Scott Kingery came out and was hitting 340 right now and looked like the player that we thought he was going to be, you'd say, all right, like maybe we're not going to, run it back with a higher priced middle infielder. But I just don't know how you can move forward with Scott Kingery as a key piece of your lineup beyond this season based on what we've now seen from him, and not just this season, but the way that he performed and struggled at times, or certainly during his rookie year, and then even at times last year. I know that the numbers were a lot better, but he went through periods a year ago where he really struggled after being really hot. And so I just don't think you can move forward with Scott Kingery with any confidence. And if the price is right, yeah, I think that you have to look at Didi Gregorius and certainly the catcher as well.
Yeah, Bob, I was going to ask you, I was going to follow up with Kingery. I mean, they signed him to that deal. They bought out all his arbitrations. I mean, I thought they made a smart move by doing that, by saying, you know what, you were good enough. Let's put you on the Major League roster. We'll buy out those years. They got him at a great deal. What is his? He's 26 years old now. Does he have trade value?
Maybe as a buy low, change of scenery type of guy, but no. I mean, he's basically at rock bottom in terms of his overall value right now, and so I don't think that he is that change of scenery candidate, especially because it's not like he's unhappy here. It's not like that there's bad blood between the player and the organization. And the Phillies just traded a guy where I think that bad blood was starting to kind of come to the surface last year with Nick Pivetta and the organization. But I don't think it's like that with Scott Kingery. I think that this is a guy that they really like. He really likes being here. It's just not working right now. And he had some injury issues earlier in the year, and not just COVID, but he had a shoulder thing, a back thing. He talked about how that impacted him early on. But it just still has not come together for him. And I just don't know at this point how many more bats the Phillies can give him on a consistent basis before they say, listen, we just can't do this anymore. We can't do it this season. We'll have to try to figure it out in the winter. So as far as trading him, I don't foresee that. I think he'll be on the team next season. But like, if he does not experience a significant rebound here over the last 30 games, and if they make the playoffs into the postseason, then I just don't think you can pencil him in as a starter anymore.
I was going to say, do you think at this point he is no longer an everyday player in this particular – are they not viewing him any longer as an everyday player?
He'll play just because of the versatility, and I think that they like the upside still and they want to get him right. But I don't believe that he is – I don't think that he will be a starter quote unquote, moving forward for them. There's just too many other options. They have too much versatility with their bench options.
If they're going to play Bohm every day at third, which looks like now, that means he looks like the odd man out, right?
Yeah, sure. And I'm kind of curious to see what they do with Bohm. I mean, is Rhys Hoskins starting to swing the bat a little bit now? And he's going to have to do that if he wants to continue to play first base for this team. I know he's a team leader, a great guy. I thought he handled that press conference yesterday extremely well. But he's starting to swing the bat in addition to still getting on base. That's encouraging. So I think if your plan is to play Bohm at third, I just don't know what you do with Kingery, especially when you have Hazley. You have Roman Quinn, who I know can be frustrating at times, but has certainly shown, too, why he is such an exciting player and why Joe Girardi likes him so much.
What stands out to you about Alec Bohm? The power numbers, we saw that maybe he had a little bit more pop in the bat. He only has the one homer, but he continues to drive runs in, and it's almost as if you hear about the launch angle. You got to hit the homer. It's either a home run or strike out. I honestly feel like he just goes up there and swings the baseball bat, and look what's happening. I mean, he's hitting over 300, and it's beautiful. Yeah,
I think the one concern with Alec Bohm is, does he have elite power? And I don't think he has it right now. I do believe he can develop and become a 25, 30 home run guy, but I don't think he's going to be that type of hitter right now. But I'll tell you what really impresses me more about Alec Bohm than anything else is that he does not look like a hitter that's in his first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of Major League Baseball. I mean, he is poised. He will use off field. He can hit with 2 strikes. He's not jumping and trying to launch everything and jack everything, which is something that so many young hitters fall victim to. Just a really professional, advanced, mature approach at the plate from him. And from an offensive standpoint, I know that he's been pretty brutal defensively, but from an offensive standpoint,
you're being
there's
kind.
There's not more than you can ask for from Alec Bohm right now. Defensively, though, I don't believe that he's a third baseman. I know the Phillies want him to be there. I just don't believe that that's going to happen long term. I think that he's probably playing base for this team, or he's a DH, or if they really want to try to go like the Pat Burrell route, maybe they try to turn him into a left fielder. But I think he's destined to play first base and maybe making it DH.
Trade deadline Monday. Any shot at a shocker that they have to do something with Real Muto because they can't sign him and they want to get something for him? Or is that completely off the grid?
It is completely off the grid. I guess you can never say never, but I would be stunned. I don't know how you would sell that to a team that right now is in the playoffs. They woke up today. They're a half game. They have that last playoff spot by a half game. I just don't think you can trade your arguably second best player, third best player. I don't know what type of message that would send to the right fielder, especially. I just think you would totally lose your clubhouse if you traded him, even if the return was unbelievable. And even if you felt that you probably weren't going to re-sign him this winter, there's just no way they can do it. There's just no way.
I would agree with that. I especially with where they are in the standings right now. I mean, you can't just tell the fans, "Hey, we're bailing on this." Although it's weird because of this shortened thing, but yeah, does it hurt more to see that the guy that you gave up for him is now up at the majors and performing? Does that, like the Sixers, they had to sign Tobias Harris. They gave up so much to get him. Are the Phillies almost in that situation now where we have to sign him because of what we gave up to get him is now pitching at the big league level?
Yeah, I mean, every time Sixto Sanchez takes the ball and pitches and you see him hitting 100, hitting triple digits with regularity, you go, oh, my God. They could not have possibly traded this guy for 220 games of JT Realmuto. It's just, I think it does apply extra pressure. And I understand the financial implications of this. I also understand why people aren't overly confident in the Phillies front office. I totally understand it, but I will tell you, I know that logic is not always what prevails in these situations. It's just not. But logic tells you that there is just absolutely positively no way, if the Phillies want to be a competitor beyond 2020 for the next handful of years, you just went out and signed Zach Wheeler to a $110 million plus contract. You're paying your right fielder over $300 million. You talk about how you want your damn trophy back. I'm paraphrasing. It was actually a little bit more vulgar than that. You just can't let this guy walk. You can't. It can't happen, and I don't think it will.
Well, you talk about the front office and maybe not having, full belief. People don't believe in what they're exactly doing. Is it possible, and I hope the answer is no, but is it possible that Andrew Knapp's hot start makes them think, hold on a second, if we do let JT walk, here's Andrew Knapp, who's giving us 400 batting average right now.
No,
Good.
because I think that I think you understand two things, right? And I assume that you kind of believe this as well. Number one, yes, he's played really well, but it's also been 22 plate appearances overall, which is for an everyday player, basically a week's worth of plate appearances. And so it's just such a small sample size of success. And number two, the second part of it is that I think this is the fear with like a guy like Phil Gosselin. He said, like, he's got to be in the lineup every day. And I've certainly kind of thought that to myself too, but you don't want to overexpose certain players because it limits their effectiveness when they're on the field. And I think if Andrew Knapp was catching every day, I don't know that we would feel the way that we do feel about him right now and feel as positive as we do. So I don't think that's a factor at all. What I do think, though, is that Andrew Knapp has probably solidified himself as this team's backup catcher beyond this season, which I don't think was anywhere close to a slam dunk heading into it.
All right, Bob Wankel, Crossing Broad, and, of course, the Phillies' big series with the Braves right now. And, hey, it's going to be September next week, so down the stretch they come. And, of course, we'll keep our eye on it tonight. Zach Wheeler, who has been very successful so far, gets the ball for the Phils. And for more, of course, Bob Wankel, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Bob, you're a gentleman and a scholar.
Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.